Diablo 4, released on the 5th of June 2023, a multiplayer action role-playing game with a hack-and-slash element. It's one of Blizzard's newest released games, the fourth in the sequel, and has been generally wildly reviewed as a very great game. It's also been reported as the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time within the first 5 days of launch, doing over $650 million of revenue. Before we dive hands and feet into this review, I wanted to preference this by saying I haven't played Diablo 3. I've played Diablo 1 and 2 a long time ago, but I am a fairly big Path of Exile enjoyer and kind of will base a lot of my expectations and also counterweights with Path of Exile. So let's see how Diablo 4 stacks up. First, let's look at characters. The game's just launched with 5 characters, and they'll probably add more as they do more content and more expansions. But let's put this out the way first, it does not feel like minimal pickings. I played Necromancer as my first character, and I feel like there's about 5 to 10 amazing different builds that you can play in Necromancer itself, with each class having so much variety and gameplay within them. It doesn't feel like slim pickings, or that you're going to be playing the same generic build as everybody else. So what's the game like? Well, the first 35 plus levels are focused solely on story, with voice acted cutscenes, fully voiced dialogue, and a big emphasis on story. It'll take you around a large part of the map where you can explore and do all these quests that basically deal with the main part of the story campaign. The story ends open-ended and will lead right into the expansions or new story content as they come out. The story then goes from 35 once you've finished into the endgame content, up to level 50, and at level 50 you unlock the Paragon system, which will take you to level 100. There's obviously no push to get to level 100 or any push to really get more levels in general, unless you want to obviously go for higher Paragons. But once you're done with the story, you can kind of enjoy what they call the endgame progression system. The style of gameplay in Diablo games is mob grinding. You grind mobs, elites, and bosses for chances at better gear that you can either use, or if you get worse gear, you break down for crafting components to try and make your other gear better. So there's not really any terrible loot in the game, as you can always use it for something else. Again, I didn't play Diablo 3, but something interesting that the direction that Blizzard have taken the game is that landscape scales around you, making landscape just as important and as challenging at any level. This also means that you can be in the same landscape as a level 50 character or 100 character as someone who is level 3. Now this kind of can make it a bit strange where you see someone doing almost as much DPS as you, but it also makes it quite fun and interactive where you do find a lot of life and content in the game. I feel like this is lacking in a lot of games recently, where as you get higher level, you don't necessarily see as many people on landscape. And I think this was a good decision by Blizzard to try and make the world feel a bit more alive. Now I'm going to try my best not to touch on any spoilers, but what did I kind of like about the game? First of all, the story wasn't very creative, but the direction Blizzard took was to keep it as much more grounded than Diablo 3 as possible. And it kind of felt very good in that sense of it was very easy to follow. There wasn't any unnecessary twists and turns and convoluted storyline. It was very direct and straight to the point. And definitely one part that Blizzard nailed was the connection to the side characters. I felt very connected to them. I was interested in all the characters, and I felt like they developed them in such a small space of time. The one thing I didn't like about the story in particular is the ending, but I understand why they've done it this way. It's obviously to lead into further expansions and extra story, but I wasn't entirely very convinced by it. And that's as much as I could get onto trying to tell about the story without getting too much into spoiler territory. I touched on this before, but something I really liked was the build diversity within each class. I played Necromancer, like I said, in my first playthrough, and I loved every bit of it. I played one build through to a certain point, changed my build, finished the story in that, and then looked at some other build guides online to try and figure out what build I'm going to play into endgame. And I really enjoyed it. Each build felt very unique. I felt very much empowered in each build in different ways, and I think they've done a very good job making each class feel well. I know that some classes aren't as strong as others at this point in time, but Blizzard really do find themselves balancing and tinkering with classes, and one class might be worse now, but in the next update or next expansion will probably be top DPS, or much more survivable, and therefore I don't really think it's any of those times where you're upset that you've picked one class and that it's going to consistently be a bad class. I feel like they will address it at some point, and so you can basically go into the game playing any class you want to play. This is the point in the review where I do a bit of a hot take. Now I'm going to compare a bit of Path of Exile to Diablo 4. I do prefer Diablo 4's speed and impact in the game. I play from a country with not the greatest latency, and therefore Rubber Bandit is a big possibility. And sometimes when you play in games like Path of Exile, you're grinding at your level 80, 90 area, and all of a sudden you get Rubber Bandit back into a group of mobs and just get instantly exploded and, lose experience, which is probably one of the worst parts about Path of Exile. But I really do enjoy Diablo 4's style and impact of game. I know that as obviously I get stronger, I will probably speed up and mobs will get much more dangerous. So far, I feel like the impact and speed is great. Although mob density does seem to be a bit more of an issue. Some parts of the map I do feel like there's decent mob density, but some parts not really. It kind of thins out at like inconvenient times and such, which kind of makes the game kind of drag. But I think that's somewhere where Path of Exile's had a lot more time, as they've just basically perfected the game over so many years. You kind of do feel like they've got the mob density correct. Another part of the game I really like is the mechanics. The mechanics of the bosses were nice. They weren't so complicated that it was quite hard to work out what to do. I feel like everything was fairly easily avoidable. And I think they've done a really good job in terms of the creativity of each boss. I never felt like there was any fights that were too similar. Something I really also enjoy is the world difficulty system. I think it's a really good idea to have, where you can basically set how difficult the world is, so that there always is an easy mode for certain players that just kind of want to play the game a bit more casually. Although you can obviously turn it up and have the extra experience and extra drops there if you do want them. And I think that's a really good system that they had. And following into that, I really think that the crafting system is very good. I think the system works well, and I like the idea of, upgrading the gear you've got to kind of get a bit more out of it before switching gear. This means that you're not necessarily just picking up the newest thing, flipping it on because it's better stats. This kind of also gives you a bit more barrier before switching gear. And also I do like the idea of saving certain, effects from legendary armors and putting them in other pieces. I think it's pretty good. Another thing I really like about this game is the Transmog system. I have a video on Guild Wars and why I think their Transmog system is really good. But I like it. I like this system a lot. I think that it makes you feel like you don't really need to dip into the store to get like decent looking cosmetics. In fact, I think probably the better cosmetics are the ones that you have from landscape and the armor pieces around you, rather than the ones in the store. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that you feel that you look really good, even though you don't have to dip into any real life money. Another thing I really like about Diablo 4 is the Tree of Whispers daily kind of quests. Even though they're not daily and you can just kind of keep repeating them, I love the idea of certain areas of the map just being straight up PvP. That just creates so much utility, and I feel like there's just so much fun and interesting things around the map. And I think that they've done a good job on the size of the map. I feel like you feel like there's a lot to explore and very unique kind of feels in certain areas. Good mob types. I feel like they've kind of created a lot of diversity in mob types. And I like the fact that the story doesn't take you to every single place. That there are still areas of the map that you will want to go to and explore, even past completing the story. And with all of that being said, what are the things that I think are a bit missing on this? What were misses? I think first of all, something that was a bit of a miss was the fact that gems go into your big bag. I feel like they should have created a separate tab for this and kind of had equipment to one side and gem for the other side. I just logistically to have a gem take up as much bag space as a two-handed sword just seems a bit silly, and it kind of frustrates you when you have to stop action in a dungeon to go back and deconstruct things. The game does make it quite easy. There's no kind of limit to how many teleports you can do, so you kind of can just go in and out. But I feel like breaking the combat unnecessarily just kind of slows down a game. It makes it not as fun. Another con, although I find this with most MMOs and ARPGs in general, is just how long it takes for your build or your gameplay to develop. I'd say the first 15 or 20 levels, you feel a little bit weak. You haven't really found your strong abilities, how they interact with each other, and basically your gameplay style. But it's also like this with MMOs. We only had like start off with like 2 or 3 skills and you get more as you level up. And it's kind of also releasing power slowly to you. I feel like it's a slight bit of a con because I feel like if you knew how much you popped off, it would kind of feel a bit stronger. But then again, games that give you too much power too quickly, like maybe like Lost Ark and stuff, you also don't really appreciate as you unlock how the game changes. So it's kind of a bit of a question mark con for me because I do see why they do this, to give you that feeling of progression. But it also does kind of make the beginning feel a bit more cumbersome and slow. Another con is this, comparing Path of Exile to Diablo 4. Path of Exile has had so many years perfecting everything about the game. Every 3 or 4 months bringing out a new season, just seeing what the community loves, what they don't like, keeping it, working on it, developing it. They've basically just shredded this game to such a degree that it is in such a good state at the moment. Yes, they've had 1 or 2 blunders in recent seasons that were quite public. But the game is in such a good state. There's so much build diversity and love for the game. And it's a free game. It's so hard to kind of justify anything else with such a good game as your competitor. But I do think that Diablo 4 has a place. I feel like it is a very good game. Its graphics are good. Its playstyles are good. I feel like the story is actually fairly decent. And I definitely think that going forward into expansions, it could be well worth it. And that's also another thing is the expansions will obviously cost. Maybe some content drops won't, but the expansions will obviously cost going into that. And comparing the two, it's hard to justify such a high price tag. $70 or €70 just for the base game of Diablo 4, as opposed to Path of Exile, which is completely free. And yes, there is like 1 or 2 tab slots that you can buy, but in terms of other things, there's no pay to win this. It's not really like you even pay for that much convenience, although there is paid convenience on it of having more bank tabs. The game is such a good game, so it's so hard to compare the two and justify a $70 price tag. I do think it is a little bit steep. Playing the game myself, played it through, and I'll obviously play it till level 100 and get to endgame, do some harder dungeons and such. But just from what I've seen, I think it's quite hard to justify it at this point in time. So in conclusion, I would say if you do love ARPGs and you've played Path of Exile and you're kind of a bit bored of it, maybe gone through the seasons a few too many times and you want something just unique, a different flavor, I'd say Diablo 4 is a brilliant game to go for. And I would say if you're a Blizzard fan and you do enjoy Blizzard games and you want to kind of get all the extra things from Blizzard, go into the game. It's a good game. But I would say if you are new to ARPGs and you want to play a game like Diablo 4 and you just kind of don't really feel like a $70 price tag is worth it, go into Path of Exile. I couldn't recommend the game higher enough. Although, if you do, go watch a guide from Zizrin or someone like this and get a guide for the season, play it, enjoy it, and just enjoy the game for what it is. But like I said, I think Diablo 4 is a very good game. I think that it's definitely been well worth it for me and I've enjoyed it. But yeah, I just hope this helps someone make a decision onto whether to get the game or, play Path of Exile or even just gaming in general. Anyway, have a good one. Cheers.